From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel, a Potomac Watch podcast.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel. It is my profound pleasure to sit down this week with a key player in Trump's DOGE and energy and environment agenda. And that would be Lee Zeldin, the new head of the Environmental Protection Agency. There's so much to talk about. Lee, thank you for joining us this week.
You got it, Kim. It's great to be with you.
Former member from New York and Congress, confirmed at the end of January at EPA. And here's what I want to start with, because I think people just have so many questions about this, and that is DOGE is on everyone's mind. You've been putting out regular updates on the work you are doing, which you note is in partnership with DOGE. And I think a lot of people have questions about how that works in practice. When you are going through these line item projects and deciding what to keep, what to change, how does that work in terms of DOGE people, your people, et cetera?
It's really been a partnership. Everyone inside of the building at EPA, all of the personnel here at EPA are employees of the agency. We don't have any outside people here inside of the building. So we're working with employees internally to EPA in deciding where there are efficiencies to pursue. And as it relates to grants, the team partnered with DOGE have been working really hard to try to identify any opportunities to be able to save money. EPA spent many tens of billions of dollars in 2024. And with a federal deficit as high as it is, it's important for us to ensure that funding is only where necessary, where obligated by statute, where fulfilling our core mission. And here at the EPA, we are really zeroed in on an initiative called Powering the Great American Comeback, ensuring clean air, land, and water for all Americans, unleashing energy dominance, permitting reform, making America the AI capital of the world, and bringing back American auto jobs. And we just can't afford to be wasting money. My message to Congress, to the president, to the American public is that we don't need to be spending many tens of billions of dollars. We don't want it. We don't need it. We want to be responsible stewards of tax dollars, and we want to ensure that we aren't wasting even a penny of your audience's hard-earned money.
So just to be clear, to the extent there's some DOGE element here, what are they offering? Some advice, and then your people are looking into it? Or there are some people that technically work for DOGE, but they're EPA employees? How's it work?
Correct. We have a few employees here at the agency who are our liaisons between EPA and DOGE.
Got it.
And they work here in the building coming up with recommendations. And ultimately, At the end of the day, I'm the administrator. I have to decide whether or not to cancel a grant. No one's making that decision for me. But to be best informed through the very good research and partnership with DOGE has been an incredible asset to ensure that we're doing the right job. And finding an efficiency is really across the board. It's looking at grants, contracts, real estate footprint, travel, media subscriptions, and staff, and ultimately looking at any way to, whether it's right-size the agency from personnel to ensure that we are right-sized with the amount of money that's being spent. It is my duty to make sure that I can stand before the American public on any given day and with great confidence guarantee that I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that operationally we are doing everything we can to best represent Americans and fight for Americans. And again, honor the rule of law, our obligations under the law, and following our statutory requirements as set by Congress.
Let's touch on a couple of those areas you just mentioned. Last week, you announced you were canceling another 21 grants worth about $136 million, bringing your total so far taxpayer savings efficiency, as you note, up to $287 million. What are some of these grants that are being canceled? What are the arguments for canceling them?
Well, what I've heard through the years when it relates to, say, something called environmental justice is that a pitch is made to the American public that there is an environmental concern in a community that has been left behind, and that we need to drive as much support towards that specific area and need in order to help them catch up. When I hear a definition like that, I mean, you'll get almost 100% of America saying, what can we do? What is possible? But unfortunately, what's been happening is that in the name of environmental justice, it's being used to justify extraordinarily large sums of money going towards activist groups instead of actually remediating what you said that funding was needed for in the first place. For example, Climate Justice Alliance was receiving $50 million from the EPA. It's one of the grants that I canceled. Climate Justice Alliance says that climate justice goes through a free Palestine. I would argue that instead of spending $50 million to Climate Justice Alliance, that we are spending a dollar narrowly focused on actually dealing with the environmental issue, that anyone can make their best argument as to why this pot of money would emerge in the first place. So we're going line by line, looking for all of those examples. And listen, this is not about removing money from a left-wing organization to give it to a right-wing organization. This isn't about a ping pong of politics and partisanship. This is about being a responsible steward of tax dollars. I am not going to give the money to some right-wing activist group because we've had a change of administration. This is about the American taxpayer, period.
Right. And I think you make a great point that some of these words that are now common currency in Washington, like justice, have really had their definitions elasticized to a point where they can be used for anything. One fight in particular, it's getting some headlines, and even I was blown away by this when I first started reading about it. There is this $7 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund with some very questionable outlays that was also somehow outsourced to Citibank. Now there's this lawsuit from some outside activist groups this weekend trying to get these funds restored. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about this particular, it sounds like a boondoggle to me.
In total, it was actually $20 billion sent to an outside financial institution. What was first the alert, the siren that went off that caused members of Congress and myself to start talking about it was back in December. There was a video of a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were throwing gold bars off of the Titanic, rushing to get billions of dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. And the person in the video was talking about how they were trying to get themselves jobs at the recipient NGOs. It was a pledge that I made to Congress and to these senators that if confirmed, it was going to be a high priority to figure out what he was talking about, where the money went, and what we could do to reestablish oversight. We found that there was not only $20 billion that was sent to this outside financial institution in the latter part of 2024, but that the financial agent agreement, the account control agreements were drawn to minimize EPA oversight, to tie the hands of EPA behind their back, money that was given out to unqualified recipients. We see all sorts of examples of self-dealing and conflicts of interest, entities that were created just to receive the money. One entity received $2 billion in 2024 after reporting $100 in 2023. They had it in their grant agreement that they had 90 days to complete a training called How to Develop a Budget. My argument is that any organization that needs to complete a training called How to Develop a Budget isn't ready to be given $2 billion. I'll give you one other example. There was another entity, another NGO that received $5 billion.
$5 billion with a B.
$5 billion. The person who was made the director of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund came from that NGO into the Biden administration, gives the former employer $5 billion. And there are examples on the other end of this pass-through scheme where one organization received $20 million. Their CEO, while applying for this grant, was serving on the White House Environmental Justice Council, and in the prior 3 years only received over $2 million. So what we're seeing is that it was $20 billion sent to this outside financial institution, given to just 8 pass-through entities, which then give the money out to other organizations, many of them pass-through entities. And once the funds go through that first list of 8 prime recipients, EPA has drastically reduced oversight. And we sent a letter last week to the 8 prime recipients asking 35 questions that honestly, I should be able to sit here having this conversation with you and know the answer to all of it. It should be my duty to Congress and to the American taxpayer to be able to answer very simple, basic questions, but I don't know the answer. So there's a lot of problems here with it. And the money's currently frozen, and DOJ and FBI have been investigating.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Lee Zeldin. Welcome back. I'm Kim Strassel here with Lee Zeldin, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. I think that's the thing that is still just so mind-boggling to Americans as they watch what's happening at DOGE, is realizing that a lot of this is set up in a way so that the grown-ups who've been put in charge, who were elected, still cannot find out about it or exercise any control over it. That touches on another thing, personnel at EPA. EPA has about 18,000 employees. You've said that you are restructuring. Have you reduced that workforce? Did any of them take that buyout? What are your plans for the size of EPA going forward?
We've had employees take the fork in the road where they get paid through the end of September to leave. We have employees that took the voluntary early retirement. We had some probationary employees who are no longer with the agency now. We're also going through our return to work as ordered by the president. The first round was February 24th. The next round was March 10th. And we need people back in the office. We have 5 buildings in 2 city square blocks in D.C. And anyone who comes to these buildings, you realize from the outside, these are beautiful buildings located in an amazing place right there near the Washington Mall and the White House, the National Mall. And it's important for us to actually be in the office. And when I came in to this position after confirmed, I was asking our team just for some numbers to get a picture of how occupied this space was. And since January of 2024, on Mondays and Fridays, the average attendance was about 5 to 8%. The highest attendance day since January of 2024 was 37%. Those days are over now. We ended this COVID era remote work policy. We want people in the office working together, collaborating, being productive, and making the American public proud. Now, it's possible once we get through this most recent return to work day and we see what our numbers look like as far as 60% occupancy in the building or 80% occupancy in the building, that we might not still have 5 buildings as part of our real estate footprint. In the Reagan building, for example, we occupy 7 floors. We spend just under $3 million per floor per year. And we have space in these buildings to consolidate and to save money. And it's just about saving tax dollars. It's about being a responsible steward of money. That's what this is all about. Now, as far as right-sizing the agency, I don't want us to have a single person less than what we need either in order to accomplish our mission. We just finished an amazing response effort in Los Angeles with the wildfires. President Trump gave us 30 days to complete our hazardous material removal. There was at first a lot of blowback and skepticism saying that there's no way we get it done within 30 days, but EPA did an amazing job. We ramped up to over 1,500 workers on the ground, and we got it done in less than 30 days from Flint, Michigan, to East Palestine, to Western North Carolina, and Maui. The list goes on where FEMA mission assignments come down, and we stand ready to help Americans in need. And we're never going to get caught off guard for not being ready. So that's something that's important. We can't afford to have one person more than what we need to accomplish our mission. We can't afford to have one person less. And that's what we're working on right now, to make sure that every office is completely appropriately staffed to make sure that we're accomplishing our mission and powering the great American comeback. We're going to be able to save a lot of money, though, with the staff reductions. For every 1,000 or so employees less in the agency, that's about $200 million of tax dollars saved, but we're going to be responsible with how we do it.
As you just noted, there are a lot of really good federal employees, quality people that are there. They have a lot of expertise. At the same time, and I'm curious, have you encountered any resistance? There were pockets of the EPA that really made Donald Trump's first EPA administrator, made life very difficult for him, Scott Pruitt. Have you come across that?
I got to say, I've been extremely impressed with the caliber of the EPA employees. You have a whole lot of people who could be making a heck of a lot more money outside of their service in the federal government. You have a lot of people who have not just gone to college, they went out and got master's degrees and PhDs and business degrees. There's economists and scientists who can go out and make a fortune, and they've decided that they love their selfless service. This is their purpose. They believe in this country and this agency, and I've been extremely impressed with them. With that being said, listen, if we go through a return to work day and there's some person who's out there saying, you know what, I'm just not going back to the office, well, they're not going to stay with the agency. If there's somebody who is unwilling to accomplish the assignments, the jobs, if they're going to work against us accomplishing our mission effectively, they're not going to stay in the position that they've been in. So at the same time, there's absolutely nothing about our approach that is soft. It's going to come in with eyes wide open, grateful for these amazing civil servants to do these jobs. We're going to want to work with them, and I could tell that they want to work with me. And I also can tell that a lot of these agency employees understand that these elections happen. If you're going to spend a career inside of a federal agency, you might have a president win one election who you supported. You might have a president win the next election who you didn't. These things happen. And as we make decisions from the administrator's office, if there are employees who decide to become part of that resistance and not do their job and not accomplish our statutory obligations and our mission and our initiatives, well, that's something that we'll deal with head on. But fortunately, Kim, it's great to be able to report back to you to this point that everyone I've been working with has been fantastic so far.
We're going to take one more break. When we come back, more with EPA head Lee Zeldin.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel, a Potomac Watch podcast.
Welcome back. I'm here with Lee Zeldin of the EPA. Let's turn real quick to the regulatory front. There's some stories out claiming that you have recommended the White House administration move to rescind this 2009 finding that greenhouse gases are a pollution that endanger the public health and public welfare. I've always thought that was bizarre and problematic, that my exhalation somehow counts as a public endangerment. But it has allowed for a lot of mischief in D.C. In particular, this is a basis for many regulations against traditional energy. Is that a recommendation you have made to change that endangerment finding?
Once there is a decision on this particular issue, I will make sure that you know right away. There's certainly a discussion that's going on. The origination here is that once President Trump came into office, he put out an executive order instructing EPA to work with other agencies on this issue, to conduct research, to have conversations with each other, to make a recommendation. But at this point, there isn't a decision to announce. And it's important that anything that we do on any of the regulations, that I do not prejudge any outcomes. I have to follow the Administrative Procedures Act. And if I announce from the onset what I want any particular rulemaking to end up with at the end, then once you have a final rule, it could be instantly challenged in court under the ground that I was prejudging an outcome. So, there are a lot of rules that I've heard from members of Congress on, including Clean Power Plan 2.0, Particulate Matter 2.5, the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards Rule, Quad OBC, that list goes on. And I've been listening to these members of Congress who want us to look seriously at all of this, but I'm going to make sure that I do this all correctly and I follow my obligations under the law every step of the way.
Here's one you did put in an actual request for. Last month, you sent to Congress a request that it use its Congressional Review Act authority to overturn a waiver that Biden had granted to California. And this is a waiver that essentially allows that state to mandate its somewhat insane electric vehicle program. The headlines are now that the Government Accountability Office is claiming Congress cannot use CRA to get rid of that waiver. Where does that actually stand?
This is up to the actual elected members of Congress. As somebody who served in Congress for 8 years, there are plenty of times where I've seen Congress making their own decisions responsible to the American public, 535 elected members of Congress who are there because the people of this country sent them. There's no one at GAO who's elected by the American public. And what I've found is that members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are very cognizant of that. So I would imagine that the leadership in Congress, ranking file in Congress, are going to do their own independent review without being told by anybody who is not an elected member of Congress that they can't look at it. This is all based from a congressionally passed legislation that became law under the Clean Air Act, and Congress wants the ability to review these waivers, and they now have that ability.
Last question. I just want to give you a chance to make the case here. You know, when you came in and you just mentioned this at the beginning of the program, that you have these objectives, and one of them is clean air. In fact, your top one is clean air, land, and water for every American. And yet we get these headlines every day from the media suggesting that EPA is being dismantled, that it won't be able under Trump administration practices to continue in that mission. How do you intend to go about making sure that that first objective is maintained, even amid all these staff cuts and changes in grants and rules?
There are landmark historic laws on the books: the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, Toxic Substances Chemicals Act, CERCLA. That list goes on, and they set out an important statutory obligation on the part of EPA, and it's something that we take great pride in, implementing these laws that are on the books. What we won't do at EPA is make up our own laws. We're not going to be activists taking our own eye in a different direction than how Congress authorized us to act. And the Supreme Court was very clear in the Loper-Bright case in overturning the Chevron doctrine that where there is vague language in a law, they don't want, and agencies shouldn't be interpreting it however they wish. If Congress wants us to do something that we're not doing right now, Congress can pass a law. And it doesn't matter who's in charge of Congress, Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter who's in the White House, whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president. If you want to avoid any type of regulatory ping pong from one administration to the next and rules changing, it's very easy. Congress could just pass a law saying this is what we want agencies like the EPA to be focused on. For me, I'm not here to be an activist in this position. I'm not here to go rogue off of the law, to go rogue off the Constitution. And if Congress disagrees with any decision that I make on any given day, I would encourage that Congress, no matter who's in charge at any given time, to just pass a law and say that EPA should do what they want EPA to do. But I'm not going to be a free agent and go my own way and create my own laws. I served, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and as you know, 8 years in the House of Representatives. I respect the legislative process. I respect the will of the people, and every 2 years electing members of the House of Representatives. We just had an election last November. The people spoke. The mandate is clear. And for me, what I care about above all else, as it relates to doing my job and following my obligations, it is an obligation under the United States Constitution. It's my obligations under the laws of the United States of America. And if anyone in this country wants us to go in any different direction, listen, tell your member of Congress to change the law, and I'm happy to follow it.
Well, count me among those that absolutely agrees that a great first step to cleaning up Washington would just be getting the different branches of government to stay in their lane. So thank you, Lee Zeldin. Thank you for taking the time to come in. We want to thank our listeners. If you like the show, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to write to us, you can at pwpodcast@wsj.com.